Hi everybody, once again, this is Chris from fluentinmandarin.com, back with you for another video about Chinese grammar and sentence order. So in this video, we're going to be talking all about Chinese measure words. So maybe you know what measure words are in Chinese, maybe you don't, or maybe you've learnt about them a bit, but you're still a bit confused about how they work and how to use them. So in this video, I'm going to try and break measure words down for you so you understand exactly how they work. All right, let's get into it. In English, you would normally say, for example, a piece of paper or a kilo of apples. And the piece and the kilo in these phrases are a bit like measure words in Chinese. However, in English, you wouldn't say a piece of phone or a piece of shirt. But in Chinese, you need to use measure words like this a lot of the time. Okay, so you may be able to think of other words for measure words in English, for example, a cup of water or a stack of paper, and so on. But in Chinese, these kind of words are used a lot, and not just in the places that you would expect. So here are some examples of how measure words are used in Chinese. 一个苹果means literally a piece of apple, or a, or one, measure word, apple. And in English, you wouldn't put a measure word in this sentence, but in Chinese, you have to. And I'll explain why in a minute. The second example is 一头大象, which literally means a piece of elephant or one head elephant. But the actual translation of this would be an elephant. So as you can see, if you want to say an something or a something, you need to use a measure word in between. So the third example is 两条鱼, two pieces of fish, or two measure word and then the character for fish. And also you may have noticed there are some tone changes in these sentences. For example, even though it's written on the screen as 一个, we actually say 一个, and so on. So that's something to be aware of. So when do you use measure words in Chinese? Well, you use them whenever you want to say a something or an something, just like the examples you heard just now, like an apple or a phone or a person. And you also use measure words when you have a number followed by a noun. For example, 1 man, 2 oranges, or 100 flowers. There would be a measure word in between the number and the noun in these cases. And you also use measure words with the word for how many or how much, which in this case is 几. And there's another word for how many or how much, 多少, which you often use a measure word with. So with how many or how much, 几 or 多少, generally we will use a measure word. For example, how many cups? In Chinese, this would be how many, then a measure word, then cups. Okay, I hope that makes sense. You also use a measure word in Chinese with every or each. For example, every cup would be every measure word cup. Each person would be each, may, then the measure word, then person. You also use measure words after this or that. 这 or 那, 这 那. So you use measure words after these characters, meaning this or that. For example, this pen would be this, then the measure word, then pen. That, then the measure word, then cat. And you also use measure words after which, and the word for which is normally 那, which can also be pronounced 内 in parts of North China. If you wanted to say which one, you'd have to say which one and then the measure word for the thing that you're talking about. And if you wanted to say which sweater, you'd have to say which measure word and then sweater. Okay, so that's a lot of information. Now let's look at some examples of how this works so you can understand better. For example, a person would be 一个人, and obviously the tone changes in this. The tone of the 一 changes to a second tone in this case, even though it's written with a first tone. 一个人 means a person, and the character in the middle of the three is a measure word. So a is also the character for one, just a horizontal line, then the measure word, then person, 一个人. So also 2 oranges would be 两个橙子, 两个橙子. So if you're counting, the number 2, 2 changes to 两. And then after this, we have to add the measure word. So in this case, it would be 两个橙子. 2 measure word, orange. And how many cups would be 几个杯子. How many, 几, then the measure word, 个, and then 杯子, cups. 每个人 each person. 每 is each or every. 个 is the measure word, and 人 person or people. 这个人 is this person, so in this case it's this plus the measure word plus the word for person or people. Another example, 那个主意 that idea. So that is 那 and then the measure word and then idea. And which girl? 哪个女孩子哪个女孩子哪 is which, and then 个 is the measure word here. 女孩子 means a girl. So you can see that in all of these sentences we have the measure word 个, which in simplified Chinese characters looks like an arrow. So you write the first two strokes on the top first and then the vertical line below that. And if you've seen written Chinese, if you've seen written simplified Chinese, you'll have probably seen this character that looks like an arrow quite a lot, and you might be wondering what it is. So this is probably the most common measure word in Chinese. It's basically a grammar word, if you like, a grammar character. So in all of these sentences, they have the same measure word. However, the measure word is not always this character 个. It in fact changes depending on what type of thing you're talking about. And this is quite complicated, and some of these examples you just have to learn. But we can run over some of the general rules and a few of the common measure words in Chinese. For example, 把 is often used for small objects that you can hold in your hand. And in each of these cases, we use a number and then the measure word and then the name of the noun or the object. For example, 两把刀, 2 knives. 一把椅子, a chair. 一把伞, an umbrella. For objects that are like books, for example, a book, a magazine, or a notepad or something, you would use 本. For example, 一本书, a book. For clothes that are on the top half of your body, or matters, we normally use 件. For example, 一件衣服 means a piece of clothing. This one also has a kind of measure word in English, piece of. 一件衬衣 means a shirt. 一件事儿 means a matter. 张, this measure word is often used for objects made of paper or flat objects. For example, a sheet of paper would be 一张纸. A map would be 一张地图. And 3 tables, that would be 三张桌子, because a table is also a kind of a flat object. So we use this 张 measure word with table as well. So you're probably thinking this is actually really, really complicated. There are so many different measure words for different objects, and it seems really confusing. But you'll find that there are a lot of patterns, and as you get used to using these kind of words and you learn words with the measure words, it won't seem that bad. It's just a kind of a feature of Chinese that you have to get used to and you have to recognize when you hear it as well. Without trying to bog you down too much, let me just give you a few of the other common measure words in Chinese. So, for example, 片 is often used for thin or leaf-like objects. For example, 4片叶子 would be 4 leaves, 4 measure word leaves. 一片药片 would be a tablet. Or 一片麦田, we could say, is a wheat field or a field of wheat. And then we've got 知. There are a few different measure words which are pronounced 知, but they are actually different characters, which is a little bit confusing. One of them is this character that you can see at the top of the screen, 知. This is normally used for twig-like objects, but it's not used for plants. One of the confusing things is that there's another character, 知, which is a measure word which is often used for plants, but I won't get into that now, just to not complicate things. So, for example, this measure word 知 that you can see on the screen, this is used for things like pens, pencils, or long, thin, kind of twig-like objects. For example, 一支笔 is a pen, and 一支铅笔 would be a pencil. Okay, so I mentioned that there are a few different measure words which are pronounced 知, and another one is this character that you can see at the top of the screen here, which is often used for animals, particularly small animals, or something that is normally one of a pair. For example, a chopstick or a sock or a shoe as well would use this measure word if you're talking about one out of a pair. And some examples of how this is used. 一只猫 would be a cat. One measure word, cat. 一只狗 a dog. 一只袜子 a sock. And 一只手 would be a hand. Also uses this measure word. And then this measure word 根 is often used for objects that are thin and or flexible. For example, 一根头发 means a hair or a one hair. 一根线 would be a wire. And 一根香蕉 a banana. 间 is a measure word that's often used for rooms. For example, 一间房间 would be a room. 两间房间 two rooms. 三间教室 three classrooms. 家 is often used for establishments like companies, restaurants, or different shops, for example. So here's some examples of how this works. 哪家公司 means which company. You could also say 哪家公司. 那家饭馆 would be that restaurant. And 这家商店 this shop. So as you can see, in these cases, the measure word is being used with which, that, and this. And 棵 is used often for trees and some plants. So for example, 一棵树 is a tree. And 99棵玫瑰 would be 99 roses. So you don't just use measure words for one or a or an. You can also use them with larger numbers. This is another important measure word, 条, which is used for something that is narrow and normally long and winding or twisty. And it's also used for trousers. In the UK, we call them trousers, or pants if you're in the US. So for example, 一条河 would be a river. 一条线 is a wire or a cable. You've noticed that actually we used 一根线 in a previous example. So some words may have multiple measure words that are correct to use with them. And also 一条裤子 is a pair of pants or a pair of trousers if you're in the UK. And 辆 is often used with vehicles with wheels. For example, 一辆汽车 a car. 一辆自行车 a bicycle. And 位 is often used when you're referring to people in cases where you need to show respect. For example, when you're referring to a teacher, you would want to show respect to that person. Therefore, you would use 位 as a measure word to show respect for that person. So 一位老师 would be a teacher. 一位老人 an old person or an elderly person. And 一位客人 means a guest. So normally when we're talking about people, we use the first measure word I talked about, 个. But in situations where you want to show respect, you use 位. And in restaurants, they will also ask you how many people, 几位, which is another usage of this character. And lastly, we have this character, 个, which is the measure word that I taught you about first. And it's used for people, abstract ideas or abstract concepts that you can't really put any material measure words with. And also any other objects that don't have a set or an obvious other measure word that goes with them. So anything that can't fit into any of the other categories will use 个 as the measure word. And in certain situations, 个 will not be stressed, or it won't be pronounced in a particular tone because it's unstressed. That's another thing to bear in mind. So here are some examples of how 个 is used. For example, 几个人 would be how many people. 一个机会 an opportunity. In this situation, opportunity is an abstract thing. You can't put another measure word with it. So if you're speaking Chinese and you don't know the correct measure word to use in a particular situation, you can always use 个. And generally, even if it's not technically the correct measure word to use, you will be understood fine. And the last major point about measure word is that some nouns are actually measure words in themselves. For example, nouns for containers, units of measurements, or time, they are measure words on their own, so you don't need to add another measure word to them, if that makes any sense. For example, 一杯, this word 杯 is cup, and cup is also a measure word. So if you were to say 一杯咖啡, a cup of coffee, or 一杯酒, a cup of alcohol, you wouldn't add another measure word because cup is already a measure. Also, words relating to time. For example, 七点, 点 is o'clock. 三块 means 3 pieces, or it can mean 3 yuan, the Chinese unit of currency. 100米, meters is also a measure on its own. You don't have to use a measure word with that. 4岁 means 4 years old. And 5天, 5 days. All of these words are measure words in and of themselves. Also, 1年 would be 1 year. 1 year, we don't need a measure word for that. However, if you're saying 1 month, you need to say 一个月. And here, 个 is the measure word. So in this situation, you do need a measure word. And also, 一个星期means 1 week. And 个 is the measure word again. However, if you want to say 一点, a little bit, or this can also mean 1 o'clock, but normally it will mean a little bit. In this situation, the little bit 点 is a measure on its own, so you don't need another measure word with that. Also, 一些means some, so you don't need another measure word there. You can just say some and then the object in all of these cases. Okay, so that's a lot of information about Chinese measure words. But if you've followed this video and you've pretty much understood what I've been saying, then you will have a pretty good idea of what measure words are in Chinese and how they are used, because it's a really important part of the Chinese language which you just can't ignore and you need to know about. So I hope this helped you. There are some tips on measure words which I just want to give you now. There are more measure words than all of the ones that I put in this video. I've only included some of the common ones, so there are a few more, but they're probably used a bit less, and you can probably pick them up as you are learning Chinese in the future. Measure words may seem really complicated, but they're not really that hard. You'll get the hang of which ones to use and when over time as you listen to more Chinese and you practice it, and you practice speaking with measure words and paying attention to how they're used. You'll get the hang of which ones to use, even if sometimes you might get them wrong, but that's okay. Every time you learn the word for an object or a noun, it's a good idea to learn the measure word to use with it at the same time. So for example, don't just learn flower equals 花. Learn a flower is 一朵花 or 一枝花. If you're learning with a teacher or you're learning with a course, hopefully the course will tell you about measure words and teach you. For example, my Surviving Chinese course, I cover measure words when we're learning new objects and new words. So you'll be learning that at the same time. If you're learning with a teacher, you can also ask them about measure words every time you're learning a new noun. And it's a good idea to just learn the measure word with the noun at the same time. So that way you'll get used to how they're used and you'll be able to pick them up more easily. Some dictionaries will also list the measure words with the definition, or when you look up a character in the dictionary or an English word in the dictionary, which is really helpful. Okay, so I hope this video really helped you to understand measure words and how they work. I'm really excited about doing all of these videos, and I've got a few more videos about Chinese grammar coming up in the future as well. But if you want to get a lot more information about Chinese and some lessons and tips and all of my writings about learning Chinese, you can go to my website, fluentinmandarin.com, and you can also sign up there for my mailing list, which I really recommend you do, because if you're on the list, you'll also get sent exclusive content and tips and information which I don't publish anywhere else. So go over there and sign up for that anywhere on the site where you can see a sign up. And if you want to go into more detail and learn Chinese in a systematic way, you can also go over to my website and check out my full courses on there as well. Thanks for watching, everybody, and I'll see you next time.